Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Transportation Policy Body Meeting for Tuesday, August 13th, 2019. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. One of the things that, before we get to the director's report here in a moment, I want to remind everyone that this is probably our director's last meeting today. So we want to tell him thanks very much for all of the service to WAMPO over his service here. And we look forward to keeping in touch with him, but we want to thank him very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was just kind of contemplating this the other day, and this pretty close to 2,000 meetings I've attended over my 46 years, and that's enough. So I really appreciated all the support and kindness I've gotten here, even with Pete as chairman. It seemed very well. No, I appreciate very much of being able to serve, and what started out as a 90-day term kind of turned into 3.5 years, and I've really enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting back into the planning mode of things, and I hope I've done my best to help you move to where you want to be. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you very much, Phil, for your service. We appreciate it very much. One of the things that you'll note on our agenda today is there is an executive session, and we will hold an executive session today. Kelly Rundell is in the room, and the purpose of that is to see if we can talk about a replacement for Phil. So it's an important meeting for everyone today. With that, we have meeting minutes from August 13th and July 9th. Move to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next item is the director's report and update. Phil.
I'd like to start with a little bit of a different type of activity for you here. On your table, you'll see what's called a major regional priority ranking form. And what we'd like for you to do, and this is kind of a way to help all of us get a better idea of what you feel are the priority projects that you listed. I think you listed 15 at the last meeting. And we'd like to kind of get your ideas on what the top 5 priorities that are in there. You'll see the projects listed. We'd like for you to circle the 5 that you feel are the priorities and rank them from 1 to 5, with 1 being the highest priority. If you'll do that and pass it to the ends of the table, then staff will pick that up and tabulate your results and have a presentation towards the end. I think Chris is scheduled to make one under 4D, and it will reflect what you've all said are your highest priorities. This doesn't mean that they can't change if trends or other things kind of make a difference, but we'd like to get your ideas on what you feel are the highest priorities. Some of the other things that I wanted to talk about today. We tried to be a little bit more comprehensive in what we've been doing, and the director's report lists several different topics that we're trying to, again, try to reach out to other organizations who do things that are tied with transportation, like land use, housing, all of those kinds of things, to get a better idea of how we might work together as a team rather than individual groups and possibilities that way. What we're doing is we are meeting with REAP, Kansas Global Trade Services, South Central Kansas Economic Development District, Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce, Harvey County, K96 Corridor, 254 Corridor, Greater Wichita Partnership, and the student, trying to develop kind of ideas as to how we can move forward into the future. We've also been asked to be a member of a grant program entitled Central Plains Heartland Freight Technology Plan. And this again is several departments of transportation, including KDOT, Nebraska DOT, Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri, the Heartland Civic Collaboration, and then several MPOs, Des Moines, St. Louis, Omaha, Mark, and WAMPO. And the idea there is to try to come up with a freight technology type plan that will help make a coordinated effort again throughout the Midwest and up into the upper Midwest. We're also in the process of switching IT support from the city of Wichita to Sedgwick County, and that should be done on September 3rd. We'll have the changeover. We're going to do other things in-house rather than, we went out for bids on accounting. We sent out to 35 organizations and got 0 responses. So we're going to try QuickBooks. That's been approved by KDOT. And KDOT can have access to the books that way online. And we're trying to make that a little bit more transparent at the meetings to where all of you can see what cash position is, what we're doing in terms of reimbursements and all those things. And the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, and KDOT recently finished their recertification hearing for WAMPO. And based on the results of the report, WAMPO is recertified through 2023. And unlike times in the past, we got some glowing remarks this time as to how we've improved and how we're doing things better. So I was very pleased with that, and hopefully that will reflect in what we're doing for the future. Also, we have another series in the webinar series, and I can't remember the title, but Kristen probably can. And one of the things we also want to show you today is we have 2 interns on staff now for the summer. And I'd like to have Tricia kind of introduce them to show a video that they've put together on hike and bike training. And it's a short video, but we'd like to show it to you to see what kind of quality work they do.
Well, we have 2 communications interns who are developing a video series that will help support our long-range plan. In the middle of doing that, if you can imagine, they did this special little bonus video for us to help support our annual bicycle and pedestrian count event. And so normally we have people come in and I train them if they're new, but now people can watch from the comforts of their own home. So I'm going to show you this. And as Phil says, the bonus is afterwards, you'll all be trained to volunteer for this.
Thank you for your interest in volunteering for the WAMPO annual bicycle and pedestrian event. Without volunteers like yourself, this important data collection event would not be possible. The following short training video will give you a sneak peek into the coming event and will explain your role as an on-site data collector. Before we begin, here's a little information about WAMPO. Otherwise known as the Wichita Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, WAMPO is the regional transportation planning agency. The WAMPO planning area is broad and covers all of Sedgwick County along with portions of Sumner and Butler counties. Focused on investments in the regional transportation system, WAMPO aspires to develop a safe, efficient, and economical transportation system that moves people and goods to their intended destinations. During this video, you will learn about your role as a volunteer, as well as what to expect before, during, and after the event. So let's get started. Each volunteer will be issued a packet of information containing a site information sheet showing images and maps of your assigned site, the type of site you will be volunteering at, as well as suggested parking and other details, a volunteer safety vest, and a small stack of public interest flyers. A clipboard and data collection sheet will be included in your packet. And for those interested in electronic data collection, an active ICT mobile app instructional flyer will be included for your use. Packet pickup will be coordinated with you directly after you have notified WAMPO of your completion of this training. Before we get into data collection, here are a few things that might help make your experience more comfortable. Make sure to arrive at your location 15 to 20 minutes prior to your scheduled count time. And once you're there, always be aware of your surroundings. Find a safe location to set up and conduct your counts, and avoid counting in extreme weather. Here are some things we suggest to bring yourself. A timekeeping device for the data that needs to be recorded in 15-minute intervals, a writing utensil if you don't plan on using the mobile app, appropriate attire including a hat, sunglasses, sunscreen, a jacket, a blanket, an umbrella, a folding chair, snacks, or even a friend to chat with. The data collection process is relatively simple. Before you begin capturing data, fill in the top section of the paper form with your name, location, date, time period, and a basic weather description like rainy, fair, very cold, etc. Mobile app users will only need to select the weather option that best reflects the environment. Currently, there are two types of site locations, screen line and intersections. In addition to the two site locations, there are three categories of traffic we want you capturing information on. These categories include 1. Bicyclists, counting the number of people on bicycles. 2. Pedestrians. This includes people using wheelchairs and strollers. 3. Other. This includes everyone else on equipment like skateboards, scooters, segways, and more. Volunteers assigned to Screenline sites should count people in all three categories who pass the Screenline site location, which is referenced here with the red dashed lines. Use tally marks to collect information on paper in 15-minute intervals during your assigned 2-hour shift. Mobile app user data will be captured automatically with each entry. Similar to the Screenline site locations, volunteers assigned to intersections should count all three categories of people: bicyclists, pedestrians, and others. The main difference in counting at an intersection is that the information is collected by direction of travel. The intersection movements are represented by the yellow dashed lines. For example, if two pedestrians are approaching from the south, you would mark your sheet like this. So now let's practice. How would you count this? Even though it's technically one bicycle, you would count that as 4 bicyclists. So how would you count this? Two bicyclists is the answer here for the same reason as our first example. How would you count these people using scooters across the road? That would fall under the category of other, since they are using scooters. And it's 4 people, so it would be 4 tally marks in other. If you have been assigned to an intersection location, your job is to count the people entering that intersection from each direction. For example, you would count a bicyclist, pedestrian, or other category based on the direction they are approaching from, either north, south, east, or west. Let's practice now. How would you count the cyclist depicted by the blue line? The answer would be 1 cyclist approaching from the south. Let's do one more example. How would you count the person depicted by the blue line walking on the sidewalk behind you outside of the intersection? Trick question, because you would not count this person. You only count people entering your assigned intersection by the road and sidewalk. Additionally, you may encounter travelers entering the intersection from various points during your shift. A bicyclist may approach from the south, and then a few minutes later approach again from the north. Count this person both times. If you have been assigned to a Screenline location, your job is to count the people who cross your line on the path or road. Screenline sites do not require direction of travel. Let's practice. How would you count the pedestrian depicted by the blue line? The answer would be 1 pedestrian. Let's do one more. How would you count the bicyclist depicted by the blue lines below? The answer would be 2 bicyclists. Please remember to remain at your location until your shift is complete. In the event that a resident approaches you about the count, please provide them with this information. Please return your materials to the WAMPO office, either in person or by mail, using the provided envelope. Materials to return include the clipboards, safety vests, and the count forms you filled out with tally marks, unless you were using the mobile app. Once you have completed this training, send us a note and let us know that you are done. Once we hear back from you, we will coordinate a delivery or pickup of your volunteer packet. Thank you again for volunteering for the WAMPO Annual Bicycle and Pedestrian Count event. Your help is greatly appreciated.
We're so excited about that. So this is Amy and this is Emily, and they are here for just a little bit longer, and they have a bunch of work to do, so they were just kind of masterminding over there, so I'll let them go, but I just wanted them to wave hi. So we still have about 20 slots that we don't have volunteers for. Bethany sent out an email yesterday asking all of you to share within your local communities. If you know people who like to volunteer, if you know people who like to watch people, this is a great time to get a chair out and just watch people go by. But it's really great because it's the only way that we can get bicycle and pedestrian data, at least that snapshot every year. So you can email me if you have questions. That's it.
This is kind of the forerunner to what we're trying to do with our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, is to make it more visual than turn out another 400 pages of text. Because right now, Move 2040 usually is used for a doorstop, and we want to make sure that people get more interest and more involved in what we're doing and how we're doing it. So the two young ladies are doing an excellent job, and they have more energy and imagination than I've seen in a long time. But I think you'll be seeing a lot more of the video presentations that come through, and we'll be using those to go out to public presentation as well. That's all I have.
That's all you have this morning. Very good. Hey. Next item that we have is consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions on the consent agenda? Not, I move to approve all 4 items.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next item is public comment opportunity. Does anyone wish to speak during public comment portion of the meeting today? Seeing no one. Next item, item 4 Alpha has been postponed until September. 4 Bravo. Chris?
Thank you. So I don't know if I can compete with that video, but I'll do my best. So we have another Move 2040 amendment for you, probably the last Move 2040 amendment before we adopt our new MTP next summer. Here's hoping anyway. We have 3 changes here, and they're the product of 3 different requests for changes to the MTP from various jurisdictions. First up, we have a change to the North Junction project. This is really a follow-up to a decision that this board made several months ago to use most of our end-of-the-year money, the excess funding that we have available from deobligated projects or projects that have not used as much money as we thought. Several months ago, this board decided to allocate that funding to the North Junction, and we just need to make a small change to the description of that project in Move 2040 to make clear that that's permissible, that we're allowed to do that. So, bit of a housekeeping thing here, implementing a decision you guys have already made. This is based off a request that Pete Meitzner sent to us a while ago that we've been sitting on until we got all the details finalized. Second, we have a change from Andover that Troy Tabor requested. This is a new project that we're adding to the MTP. It's a locally funded project, so funded from Andover's own resources, doing some improvements along Andover Road from the Redbud Trail to Ira Court. This is actually some improvements that are associated with reconstruction of the high school and middle school there. They're improving the schools, want to make some road improvements to go with that. And finally, the third project is one from the city of Wichita. It's a new multimodal transit center associated with the ballpark that's going in across the river that we can see making progress by the day. So the multimodal transit center, basically we've been asked to add this to the long-range plan to help support some grant applications that the city of Wichita is making to get FTA funding to fund this. Again, there's no WAMPO dollars associated with this change at this point. It's really to support this effort to seek federal dollars from elsewhere, primarily from these FTA programs. So 3 fairly straightforward changes. These changes do meet our federal fiscal constraint requirements, so the total amount of money coming in is still going to exceed the amount of money that is planned to be spent over the next 20 years. And they don't affect the WAMPO funding for any project, any other projects, so no one's losing any funding for this. The only change to the WAMPO funding is what you would essentially implementing what you had already decided to use the end of the year money on the North Junction project. So, happy to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Have any questions for Chris? Seeing none, I move that we approve Move 2040 Amendment 6. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Chris.
All right, I will also collect any last-minute ranking forms if anyone has one that didn't get passed up earlier. All right, I will go help Tricia tally those while you hear about the tip amendment from Kristen.
Very good, thank you. Next item, item 4, Charlie, is the tip amendment number 3. Hi, Kristen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm here with a tip amendment item for your consideration and action today. This is Amendment 3 to our Transportation Improvement Program for our current TIP, the 2019 to 2022 TIP. You usually see these amendments come through on your consent agenda because for the most part, we handle pretty routine sorts of changes that come through these TIP amendment processes. This is on your regular agenda today for a couple reasons. The first is that a couple of the requested changes were dependent on the action that you just took during the previous item on the Move 2040 amendment. So because that was passed and went through, we'll go ahead and move forward with this one now. So we did receive requests to make changes to 11 projects during this amendment cycle. 10 of those requests do require formal action by this board in order to be approved and inserted into our TIP. You can go over all of the changes that are requested. They're in a project report in your packet if you so choose to review those. So in addition to the usual sorts of routine changes we see during amendment. During this cycle, we did do something special and unusual. This is the amendment where we're programming the WAMPO end of year funding for this year, for 2019. So let's start with that. And Chris had alluded to this a little bit in the previous item. So you probably recall during the first part of this year, this board spent quite a bit of time, probably January through April, debating and discussing and whittling down the candidate options for us to use any end of the year funding we might have this year. And earlier this summer in May, this board took a vote to put $100,000 set aside for any of our end of the year money to handle any last minute changes in our balance. To just pay promised reimbursements early, move them forward. So those are very flexible, and that helps us handle any last minute changes in the balance that might come through between July and the end of September. And then this board also voted to put the remaining, any of the remaining end of year funding to contribute to acquisition of right-of-way up at the gold phase for the North Junction project. So since that vote, I've been working with KDOT. We've got the balance finalized. For this year, we're looking at $1,766,277 for our end of the year balance, providing there's no more changes between now and the end of September. And I'm here today in August with asking you to vote on programming the actual dollars amount. Back in May, we were asking you to vote on some guidance and targets. So I'm here today with the actual dollar amounts. So let's just jump into that project. This is a project that's currently in our TIP. KDOT requested that it be inserted into our TIP during the last amendment cycle, and this board approved that. This project covers all of the pre-construction activities necessary for the gold phase construction and includes right-of-way acquisition along with final design and utility relocation at our current cost estimate right now is $27.5 million for all of those activities. So the change that's being proposed today is to take out $1,667,040 of KDOT state funding that had been set aside for right-of-way acquisition and replace that with the WAMPO funding. So that's the exact change you'll be acting on today. I did want to draw to your attention, this project also includes $500,000 each for right-of-way acquisition. Sedgwick County and City of Wichita have also contributed to that, along with the WAMPO, about $1.6 million. So we do have a few other changes I'll run through real quickly. We got requests from KDOT, from City of Wichita, and also City of Andover to make a few additional changes that do require your approval to be inserted. This was a request from KDOT to do a bridge repair project down on I-235 in the southern part of our region. It's located just west of Broadway. Again, this is some bridge repair work at a cost of $3.3 million. KDOT's also requested to add this project to the TIP. It's also on I-235, a little bit further west, intersection project at Seneca Street and also at West Streets. This is a project that's being done in conjunction with the City of Wichita to do some traffic signal additions as well as some geometric improvements at those two interchanges. That total cost is $760,000, again split about 75-25 Wichita and KDOT. And then KDOT's also requested to add, that's going into the TIP is 3 separate projects. I've grouped them together here just for ease. These are guardrail updates that will take place on the guardrail on I-135 all the way from up at 37th Street North down to the KTA interchange at the south end of I-135. And all these 3 added together are at a cost of $400,000. Next, we got a request from the City of Andover. This is the same project that Chris talked about in the earlier Move 2040 amendment item. Again, this is to do some road upgrades. This project was currently in our TIP as just a bike ped project to add a new multi-use path along this corridor between 13th and 21st on Andover Road. The change being proposed is to add these additional road improvements to accommodate the traffic expected with this new school construction. So, and again, this is all locally being put into the TIP. It's locally funded. Got just a couple more here. This one is a request from KDOT to make a budget change. This is a project that's already in our TIP. It's a bridge repair project on I-135 at a bridge just south of 21st Street. The cost estimate's gone up about 75% from $7 million to $12 million for a couple reasons. One is KDOT added a little bit more work to the scope to be done, and then they also updated their cost estimate based on some recent bids that had come in that must have been higher than what they were estimating before. This was a request from the City of Wichita to add a new funding source to this project. Some of you might remember this project. This is one that received WAMPO funding as part of our end of the year balance process last year in 2018. This is a kind of a technology project to add some fiber optic cable along Kellogg and also to do some traffic signalization coordination in downtown Wichita and connect the fiber network on Kellogg to the main traffic management center right down here on Main Street. So the change being considered here is just to add some $400,000 of state funding to this project. It had been bid and all the bids came in over budget. So the state's chipping in $400,000, which is about the same amount Wichita's chipping into this, and then the WAMPO funding makes up the balance at about $1.2 million. And then our last one is also a request from the City of Wichita. This is on a project on Mount Vernon that's just west of I-135. This request is to increase the cost estimate from about $5.5 million to $7.5 million. Local funds from the City of Wichita would make up that difference to account for some increased costs that was due to some railroad coordination. So That's all of the changes that are requested changes we received that do require formal action by this board. I do want to reassure you the TIP does continue to meet federal requirements. It's fiscally constrained, which just means that the project, the estimated cost equal the revenues that have been committed to pay for those projects in our TIP. It is consistent with our long-range plan now that the amendment was adopted in your previous item. We always have 30-day public comment periods for these amendments, and we did not receive any public comments for this one. So with that, this is an action item. We're requesting your action on this. Your Transportation Advisory Committee did recommend approval of this as proposed. So I'm glad to take any questions you might have on this.
Kristen, do we have any questions at all on this? Seeing no questions, move to approve the amendment as proposed. We have a motion and a second by Tom. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. And I'm not sure that Chris is ready to come back in yet. Is he? He is. Very good. Chris, you're up.
All right, actually, I think Phil had a couple things to say on this before we.
On your tables, there's a copy of the Chamber of Commerce's regional task force showing their regionally significant transportation needs. And there was some discussion at the last meeting about this. And the executive committee and myself, and I took Chris with me, went to the last chamber meeting and was more or less explained that this map indicates the projects that the chamber would use for lobbying purposes in order to get this region's highest priorities in front of the legislature and try to get additional funding. But I'll turn it over to the chair and to Tom, because they were the members of the executive committee that were there that are here today, and if they have any additional comments.
Well, thank you. And also Brett is here, and he chairs the committee
Right.
that we met with. I don't know if you have any comments you'd like to make before we move forward. No? Anyway, the map is being updated. Brett, is this the most current map with the updates we talked about?
Yes.
That looks very good. There were some updates that were required to this map when we met at the last coalition meeting. And it sounds like that every one of those has been incorporated in this. And what these are regional significant transportation recommendations that come through a coalition of a number of organizations that do lobby our state for funding. And so besides WAMPO, there are other organizations out there that are actively trying to get funding for this region. And I think that's important, especially when we get businesses that recognize the importance of transportation. I don't have my director of public works in the room, got deputy director, but my director of public works always says that transportation is the mother milk of economic development. So we have to remember that as we move forward. Anyway, I wanted you all to be able to see that I don't think that we're working at cross purposes at all with each other. A number of folks that are in this room are on both committees. So the biggest thing is that I don't think we really talked about this at WAMPO before, so that you understood that there is another group that's out there trying to make sure that we have regional significant transportation issues that are highlighted and brought to people both in the state legislature and also in the national arena that are looking at projects that might be regionally significant. So I don't know, Tom, do you have anything you want to add?
The only thing I was going to say is that what came out of the meeting, and it was a benefit to me, is they're looking at a bigger footprint, and we're looking at a smaller footprint, and we're doing our priorities. And since day one, I've said we ought to have some of the same priorities. They may not be exactly the same, but we need to be on the same page. And coming out of that meeting, even though there was no priority list put together that day, I felt we were on the same page. So it was a positive meeting.
I don't know that they're going to come up with a priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. I know that North Junction is their number one project. But beyond that, I think they're going to have groups and say these groups of projects are at the top of the list. This group of project is next, and this group of project is below that. So they're not going to do what Chris is getting ready to talk about here in a moment and say, this is our number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 priority. Mr. Manager, do you have anything you want to add? You attend all the meetings too.
Chairman Dennis, I think you accurately described the way the meeting went, and I think Tom did too. I do believe they're shooting for categories or range of priorities, and that will be the second process after the first session with KDOT. Consult, I'm sorry, search for the word.
Very good. Anyone else that was at that meeting would like to say anything about the meeting that we attended with the coalition? Commissioner Meitzner, do you have anything?
Summarized it nice. Thanks, Tom, for your comments too. I appreciate it.
Kathy was at the meeting also. Do you have anything, Kathy? Very good. All right. Well, we just wanted to make sure that you understood that there are several organizations that are all very interested in what's happening in this region. I don't think that we're working at cross purposes by any means. We all want to do what is best for this entire region. So, Chris, you want to continue on?
Sure thing. So just to review, we've talked about this at a couple of previous meetings, but the idea here is to define what are the most important priorities for our region in the MTP, what's most important to us. And this serves a variety of purposes, but one of the big ones is to communicate these priorities to funding agencies, to KDOT, to the state legislature, to FHWA and FTA and federal grant programs. So there was some mention of KDOT local consult. I just wanted to go over what I understand KDOT is planning, and if I mess anything up, perhaps Brent can step in on that. The way they've done this is they've divided it into 2 rounds. The first round is going to be later this month, and it's going to be focused essentially on gathering a big list of candidates, making sure all the relevant projects, that KDOT has all of those in a big list. And kind of the starting point for this is the work that the Transportation Task Force did late last year, earlier this year, but they wanted to do another sweep and make sure they really do capture everything. There will be a meeting here in Wichita on the 27th. There's also one up in Hutch on the 20th. So that first round is sort of casting the broad net, getting the big list. The second round will deal more with prioritization, looking at how important these different projects are. And the latest I've heard on that is early November. I don't think we have a specific date for any meetings for that yet, but still a couple of months out. Anything to add? All right. We already talked about this, so I'll be fairly brief here. One of the things I'll note is that when they are sorting these projects into tiers, they're not going to start that until September. So in addition to affecting funding agencies, one of the things that we can do by ranking our projects here is perhaps influencing what the chamber does when they set their priorities. Maybe this might nudge projects that are important to WAMPO as a whole, perhaps into a bit of a higher tier than it might have been otherwise if we rank a particular project highly in this. So just one of the influences that doing this exercise can have. Phil wanted me to, I want to briefly review the qualifiers for our major regional projects bucket. This is part of the bucket approach that we've discussed in the past, and this board approved at a previous meeting, looking at projects that have high functional classification, that eliminate bottlenecks and prevent congestion, that coordinate land use with transportation to help the economy, enhance mobility and safety, especially for freight, tying together various modes to increase accessibility, focus on air quality with particular emphasis on community health, that demonstrate regional significance, and that fall within the region's long-term financial capabilities. So these are our list of candidates that we gathered earlier this year from this group, from the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Plan Advisory Committee. And that you were ranking earlier here. Staff, we showed you this last time, I'll be brief. We looked at how these projects, which of the outcome statements they would have the biggest impact on. So for safety and health, for instance, electric charging infrastructure, K254, which has big accident problems, the North Junction and the regional bike ped network. integrated multimodal transportation network, that's the primarily our other modes, transit and bike ped. Expanding the economy captures a lot of these projects. A lot of them have presumed economic benefits. Equity and diversity, the modes that are the projects that are very useful for folks who maybe do not have access to a car or don't have access to a car for everyone in their household. And then the quality of life to attract and retain talent, sort of the projects that help with the high density walkable neighborhood developments and passenger rail. So the goal here is to come up with a list of priorities, and I really think it would be best if we keep it fairly short, no more than 5, and to rank these. And I think the particularly important one is we really do need to choose a number 1 project for us. The stuff lower down the list, it's good to have it ranked, but the most important is to choose what that number 1 is. One of the things that came up at the Chamber's meeting is some folks there mentioned that the Secretary of Transportation was pretty impressed by the clear message from Wichita about the one project, the North Junction in particular, being communicated by a variety of different groups, that it was the most important project. So the results of that little ranking exercise we just did. Let's see if I can make this as readable as possible from across the room. So it's pretty clear that the North Junction is the highest priority project. It was ranked quite highly by everyone who did the exercise. Then there's a fairly big gap between that and the other projects. We're looking at the next few on the list being phase 2 of the I-235 and Kellogg project, East Kellogg, the regional bike ped network, K96 improvements, ARC 95, and then after that we get down to sort of a bunch of projects that are ranked relatively evenly, looking at the rest of the list. But I think those first obviously the North Junction stands out quite a bit, and I think about the next 5 projects after that stand out pretty well from the rest of the pack. You guys could take this list as it stands, could move some things around depending on what the board as a whole feels is most important. This is just intended as a starting point for your discussion. So.
Discussion recommendations. Any modifications you want to make? Do you want a motion? Or what is the next step that you need?
The next step, I think, would be for the board to take some action to decide which of these, how many of these projects they want on the list, and if this order is appropriate for those.
Kellogg would give you more issues sooner than the second phase of the Kellogg project.
I have a question. I know you said this, Chris, but so exactly what are we going to use this list for? I mean, what's going to be a part of?
So the list would be something that would feature in Move 2040 that would say in the revised MTP, Move 2040 Reimagined. And it would lay out, these are the most important projects in our region. For one thing, just to give anyone reading the document, for people who read these documents for fun, some idea what the big priorities in our region are, but also then to use as a tool for communicating, for instance, with KDOT during the local consult, with the state legislature, for grant writing. So if you're putting in a grant application for the North Junction, for instance, you can say this is the most important project in our region. If you just picking off of this list, if you were asking the state legislature when they're working on their next 10-year transportation bill, you really want to see the East Kellogg project, for instance. You can say, well, this was in the top 3 of WAMPO's most important projects. So this regional body that represents the whole region thinks that this is a really important project, that sort of thing.
Doesn't commit our funding.
So, no, this is not a funding commitment, and really, most of these projects, WAMPO's funding, we get $12 million a year. I think, sort of setting aside if you just look at the highway projects that are the top 6 on this list, I think probably the cheapest one of those is $60 million. So our funding is not going to make a huge difference on this. This is really a tool for getting funding from these other entities, from the federal government, from the state.
Talked about before, if priorities change, if something comes up, action of this board could move these projects around as well, because you're talking about this being part of the 20-year planning period.
So
Things are going to change.
things are. And for instance, one of the things we'll really see once the current project on Kellogg that goes from out Greenwich Road, K96, once that completes, we'll have be able to see more about, for example, how that's going to interact with the next segment of East Kellogg, the project we're talking about here. So as we get more information, as things change, as projects get completed, the board may wish to revisit this list, but we'd like to have something in there, at least in black and white, as the initial point for that, and to use going forward.
My concern right now is that we have obviously a number one choice. There's no question on that. The concern I have beyond the number one choice is, first of all, the process that we went to with that today. We each represent organizations. And to represent those organizations, I need to know what my organization feels beyond number one. And I don't know that by us doing the process we did today that I can tell you how my organization feels beyond number one. I don't know. I know we've got 4 people in here from Wichita, maybe that they do understand where theirs go, but we have other communities in here that have not talked to their organizations on how that this is being prioritized right now, and their organization may have different priority than what they just voted on today with a gut feeling. So going beyond number one, I'd have a problem right now.
Yes, I'm looking at it too, that the county covers all areas. Of them, if we're looking at a region, that more or less will help to make decisions at local level. Now, that's just my observation.
I don't know that I'd rather go directly to the county for the next vote. The way WAMPO is set up, we're kind of weighted the way we do things. Sedgwick County has 4 people, Wichita has 4 people. We kind of weight it, and then each of the communities have one vote on it. But that one vote that those communities have, they haven't gone back that I know of to their communities and said, where are their priorities at? And that's what my concern is Hayesville believes that this is the right priority for their community. Does Derby believe this is the right priority for their community? And so if we vote on it beyond number one, I don't know that you're going to go back and not get yelled at by your folks that you're representing today.
They can serve on WAMPO. I mean, that's why we're here.
Could we not? Could we not?
Kathy?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, I find this really confusing that we're calling all these ideas projects. I wonder if you could address that, because I'm just looking at and charging infrastructure. They're general concepts I doubt any of us would argue with, but they're not projects.
Yeah, I'll say when we initially started this effort, we were thinking of this more in terms of projects, but when we got the candidates, we did get some of these that are broader topics, like the regional charging network and the technology network. That's why we sort of shifted the verbiage a bit to major regional priorities to encompass some of these broader things. If project slips out, that's just my brain hasn't quite entirely made that switch, but we are trying to describe these as major regional priorities.
For now, can we take this back to I think we could all vote on the number one priority and say that this is where we want to go right now. But if you want to go beyond that, I think we need to take it back to our organizations and come back with a priority list from our organization. Is that going to be something that's going to work or not?
Well, so in terms of internal deadlines, we're not finalizing the MTP until next year. The longer we delay on this does essentially cost us some opportunities to influence others. For instance, the chamber is going to be moving forward with their tiering in September. And then probably the bigger one is the KDOT meetings in early November. If we don't have a decision by then, we would lose the chance to influence the local consult in terms of our prioritization. So it's really up to this board whether you'd rather have some more time or move immediately on it.
The second point is if we get the number one priority, the chance of us getting number two is probably pretty slim to begin with. But we probably ought to have a priority list if we ever got beyond that. It'd be wonderful if we could get 2, 3, 4, 5, but I don't see that that's very realistic in today's environment where that KDOT doesn't have the funds that they had 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
I've got a comment. I'm looking at this and I'm trying to go from memory, but I believe 3 of the projects that got picked out of the first 5 have been on the last 2 lists that we've done for KDOT. So I find that rather interesting. Without looking at that list, they're still important enough they made the top 5. And I may be off a mile on Kellogg, but it's one of the issues that's been on that list every year, or every time we've done it, so.
It never hurts to have a list of projects to know what the priorities are. I mean, to get more money like this coalition here was talking about, to just have something in place to know more money should be spent down in this area, and to have that list in place, it doesn't hurt to have more on there. That's my thought anyway.
David, if I may, little guy over here, candidly. I guess I don't understand your concern, because I feel like we're all representative of our cities or our entities. Most of us have been here for quite a long time and understand what's going on with WAMPO and all of these projects directly, but do you feel like some of us just don't talk to our communities or the boards that we represent, and we're not actually here to represent them, or we don't keep them apprised? Are there specific issues you've run across, I guess, with certain entities that you feel like uncomfortable that we're doing?
Well, I can give you an example. Sedgwick County has already taken a vote on exactly where their priorities are right now. And their priorities are the North Junction is number 1, the Northwest Bypass is number 2, going east on Kellogg's number 3, going west on Kellogg is number 4, and passenger rail, ARC 95 is in there for other, and passenger rail for other. So we have priorities. They're not reflected very well in this prioritization that came out today.
So is your, I guess, challenge that the 5 that you would have selected are the top 5? I mean, I don't mean to be mean, but
well, no.
I mean,
The other concern I have is that I've only got 2 out of 5 out of 4 of our representatives here today.
That's a good thing. We should all be here and vote on this if it's a consensus. I don't feel like I need to go back again. But certainly it should be everyone, because that's the correct mix. The 4 for the county, 4 for the state. I get that totally. But I don't think that we're not representing our communities properly.
I don't know that our votes, honestly, from Sedgwick County were counted today, because I only have half of my folks
Totally,
here.
absolutely. Just making sure. I felt like you were just basically telling me that I don't keep my city.
No, absolutely not. But I know what our commission is interested in. I wish that we would have had all of our commission here today, but I don't have that. Now, what's the will of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of okay with if we have to get something in writing. It'll be a statement to start with, and everybody can adjust. They can take this back and then keep it on the agenda for next month to see if we want to readjust. I mean,
you have a motion?
And make a motion to approve the list as stated.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
A point based on your issue with this. Why would we not make sure that everybody gets the vote on this?
It was the timing that they were saying to get to the, to have the chambers group have a
And we can
list.
modify this next month when the rest of the people are here, kind of thing.
I know, well,
Well, they better
shame
be.
on them.
It's WAMPO.
Right, shame on them.
And we've had what, is this the
It's the
third
second.
opportunity
It
to
is.
discuss this? And then your people don't show up and they know it's on the agenda? I don't, that's questions in my mind.
I have a question too. If we're gonna delay this a month, can we get a copy of that list in the order that it's been voted on today?
The motion wasn't to delay it a month.
The
it was
motion was to
accept it
approve
as
today.
is.
motion is
I
to
understand,
approve.
but I'd still
Oh,
like to
okay.
have a copy of that list. And I see people taking pictures of it. I'd like to maybe get an email copy of it.
Regardless, we would be happy to send out the results of this list to everyone, regardless of how the board decides to act today.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask for clarification on the motion, is it to approve the top 6 projects? Because that seems to be where the cutoff is, as our top 6, is that? Or is it just simply to approve the list as it's ranked now from top to bottom?
It was like the same.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Irrelevant. I mean, I feel like that's the exact same thing. Whether it's the top 6 or all of them, it's still the rank.
I think staff ultimately wants to get us to a list of 5 projects. And today, you have 6 that are all, or 5 that are ranked fairly close. There's a break point after Art 95.
My preference would be the entire list, only because then the Transportation Coalition that's meeting, they would see, they can determine if they wanted to break down a top third, a middle third, a bottom third. I think it'd be consistent to submit them all.
My second stands.
Is that the motion is to approve the entire list, and that's what the second agrees to? Okay. All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
All right, one clarification, does the board want to keep this on the agenda for next month to revisit this?
I think we probably ought to talk about it again, because I need to talk to the other commissioners.
Okay,
especially the ones that
we will
didn't
do
show up.
that, and we will make sure that this list as it stands goes out to everyone after the meeting. Thank you very much.
All right, Chris, thank you very much.
And sir, like, is it possible to have like number 1 and then like some of the others, 4 through 5 are in this group, and then go on down to other? Or is that
One of the
too
things
many?
you may want to do is sort of like the Transportation Coalition is doing, and saying that these are our group of top priorities, these are our second group of priorities, and third group of priorities.
That makes sense.
All right, Chris, you got job next month, okay? Okay. Next item is committee updates. Dan is not here, obviously, today. I don't look anything like him, and I'm not got a tan like he's got, so.
You're wearing long pants too.
I've got long pants on. But really, what I want to talk about today, I'm going to talk about an executive session, because the executive meeting that we had was strictly to talk about the new director. And so I'm going to withhold my comments until the time that we go into executive session. Oh, Tom, do you have anything?
The other thing we covered on the TAC was the TIP 6 and Amendment 6 and Amendment 3. We also talked about the 5310 program for buses locally, and Hayesville and Derby have picked up some funding for transit, so that was the results of that. That's
Good,
it.
thank you. And Tom, do you have anything this morning?
don't have anything too specific. I think the local consult's been pretty well covered, and I think everybody who wants to will be there. I think there's plenty of opportunity there. Local projects, of course, we've got the green project going on up on 235, so there are things going on there with lane closures during the day, and gosh, we're going to close northbound I-235 and eastbound K-96 exit ramp to Broadway beginning on August 19th, and that'll be for about 2 months. That allows the contractors to get in and construct those Broadway ramps. They just can't do it with the grade changes in the area without closing the one escape route out of that construction zone right now. So if you decide to go through that construction zone, you're going through it all the way. Other than that, southbound I-135, we've got weekend work every weekend on that bridge from 17th Street to 1st. So, and it has created congestion on the weekends, even though that's the lowest traffic time we could find to work on these. So expect that if you go through and call me with your complaints like everyone else does. Any questions for me? Yes, Tom.
I'd like to complain about it.
Duly noted.
Back up for 3 miles and then find out that when you get down there's 3 guys working.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting process with that polyester concrete they're using out there. And we voted it today that additional was for the northbound for next year, so be ready for next year.
Thank you.
I know you don't get compliments very often. I thought they did a nice job on the resurfacing on Kellogg, on the east Kellogg piece.
The asphalt overlay from Washington to Hillside, and they're working on striping on that, and every night they try to get some done depending on the rain. So they'll soon be out of there and finish with that. We've still got a couple other projects on 135 that work at night. So we try to work around the high traffic times, but boy, we sure hear about it from the people who drive at night.
The surface came out nicely.
Yes, it is. Thank you. On behalf of all of KDOT, thank you for that compliment. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Tom. KDOT, what do you have?
One other item I might mention, and I mentioned to that other group, we were at the Transportation Coalition, and that was the local consult. When KDOT says they're having a local consult, some people remember what local consult was in the past, where a bunch of projects were thrown up on a board and you get a dot, go put it where your favorite project was. And that's not what this round is. It probably should be called maybe even something different. So just for everybody to take back for your communities, when this comes up, the local consult, whether you go to the 20th or 27th, we want to get the projects that haven't been identified yet on the list, but it's not going to be bring a whole bunch of your associates and put dots up on your favorite projects. That's not going to happen. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that, and look forward to seeing everybody there.
Would you like to mention the local bridge press conference that Secretary Lorenz had the other day?
Yes, that $5 million for local bridge project. It's a start back up. I think that project ended, 3-4 years? It's been a while, 3 or 4 years ago. So that is a start back up of local bridge projects.
Good. And several of us went over to Butler County to that announcement. We appreciate everything that the Secretary is doing to try and get funding back into our area for different projects.
Also, the addition to the city connecting link agreements, getting that up to 5,500, that's been helpful too a little bit. You know, city connecting link highways going through. We used to pay 3,000. That's been bumped up to 5,500. So a little bit more money there too.
And I would imagine that we'll get a little bit of that money in this area because it does require a local match. And a lot of the areas that need bridges may not be able to afford that local match. So I think we probably are going to get some of that $5 million in this area.
Bit with this projects like these today, we voted on that one project was put up there for guard fence all the way down 135. Anytime we do 1R projects like a resurfacing project, now we address all the safety items like the guard fence. We have to let a project within a year. So any of these 1R projects through the city we see, we're going to see that guard fence project follow up. I don't know if everybody was aware of that, but that's our agreement to use federal funds on our 1R projects now, not just state funds. We're going to be doing more of those.
Very good. Well, tell Secretary Lorenz we sincerely appreciate her support. Federal. We have any federal folks here today? No one here today. Very good. Other business. Does anyone have anything for other business today? If that's the case, we have nothing for other business. What I'd like to do is, I move that we recess in executive session to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel and employer-employee negotiations with one or more candidates for the executive director of WAMPO. We will reconvene an open meeting in this room at 4:25. Do I have a second?
Motion, or second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Everyone that's not a member is excused, and we will